Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when you were alone? Tonight, we're diving into the chilling world of Skinwalker shape-shifting creatures that can take the form of anyone or anything and lurk where you least expect. From isolated desert roads to dark forest trails, these 10 true encounters will make your blood run cold. Stay with us, if you dare. They always say the desert is alive at night, not with the rabbits, coyotes, or owls, but with something older, something that doesn't belong under the stars. I never believed those warnings until the night I drove through northern New Mexico and met what the locals call Ye-Nald-Lushi the Skinwalker. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 32, and I work as a long-haul delivery driver based out of Albuquerque. I've logged thousands of miles across the Southwest, but this one trip in late October still makes my chest tighten every time I close my eyes. It started like any other route. I had a late drop-off near Shiprock and was heading back toward Gallup on Highway 491. The road stretched endlessly, a thin ribbon of faded asphalt cutting through barren mesas and sagebrush. My dashboard clock glowed 12:43 a.m., and the cab smelled faintly of stale coffee and cheap beef jerky. The radio was silent. Even my favorite true crime station couldn't cut through the weight of the silence outside. The desert at night isn't empty. It presses in on you, vast and suffocating, as though the darkness itself is watching. I noticed the first sign something was wrong when my high beams caught movement along the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a coyote pacing the shoulder, but it was running upright, its gait jerky and uneven. My pulse quickened. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, and for a fleeting second, I saw the outline of a man. No clothes, impossibly thin, its limbs too long for its body. It darted into the brush and vanished, but I swear it was keeping pace with my truck. The steering wheel felt slick in my hands as sweat built on my palms. I shook my head, told myself I was tired, hallucinating after too much caffeine and too little sleep. The desert plays tricks on people, right? But then I heard 3 sharp taps on the passenger side door. I nearly swerved off the road. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I whipped my head around, but the seat beside me was empty. The glass was dark, only reflecting my own pale, terrified face. I pressed harder on the gas, my truck roaring louder against the stillness. The speedometer climbed past 80, then 90. The desert blurred around me, but every nerve in my body screamed that I wasn't alone. Something was following. Out of the corner of my eye, in the faint glow of the headlights, I caught it again, running, bare feet slamming against the dirt, arms pumping in unnatural jerks, head swiveling toward me. Its face, God, its face looked wrong. Almost human, but the eyes were too wide, glowing yellow like an animal caught in light, and its mouth stretched impossibly far, as though it wanted to split its own skull in half. A sharp, metallic smell filled the cab, like rust and blood. I gagged, struggling to keep my eyes on the road. The desert air pouring in from the cracked window turned icy cold, though the heater blasted on full. My fingers ached from gripping the wheel. I remembered stories I'd heard in bars, whispered by Navajo men after a few drinks warnings about skinwalkers. They said if you saw one, never look it in the eyes, never speak its name, and never, ever stop driving. But the thing was fast, faster than anything on 2 legs should be. At 95 miles per hour, it kept pace just outside my peripheral vision. I could hear it now, ragged breathing that didn't match the rhythm of its strides. Sometimes it was ahead of me, then suddenly behind, as though it was flickering through the shadows. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming, the copper taste of blood grounding me for a moment. The highway stretched on, empty, no headlights coming from either direction, just me and it. Then, as if to prove it wasn't just a trick of exhaustion, the creature slammed its hand against my passenger window. The entire truck rattled with the impact. A claw fingers, twisted, and too long dragged down the glass, leaving streaks I could see even in the dark. I shouted, a raw, desperate sound that filled the cab. My foot pressed flat against the accelerator. "Leave me alone," I yelled, though I knew I shouldn't have spoken. The stories always said they mimic voices, lure you, mark you once you acknowledge them. And sure enough, seconds later, I heard my own voice echo back from the darkness outside the window. "Leave me alone." It whispered in perfect mimicry, but warped like a recording played backwards. My vision blurred with tears. I fought the urge to glance again, to meet its eyes. Instead, I focused on the dotted white lines zipping beneath my headlights, one after another, a hypnotic pattern pulling me forward. I told myself if I could just reach Gallup, just see another pair of headlights, I'd be safe. Then the truck's engine sputtered. My stomach dropped. The fuel gauge wasn't empty, but the needle bounced erratically as if the whole system was glitching. The dashboard lights flickered, and for an agonizing few seconds, the world outside plunged into total darkness. I couldn't even see my own hands gripping the wheel. When the headlights snapped back on, it was standing in the middle of the road, tall, skeletal, hunched. Its head cocked at an unnatural angle, one arm dangling longer than the other. My tires screamed as I jerked the wheel, barely swerving past it. The truck fishtailed, dust billowing into the night. In the side mirror, I saw it drop to all fours and scuttle after me, faster than ever. "God help me," I muttered, my voice shaking. The air stank of sulfur, now, thick and choking. My ears rang with whispers, some in English, others in a language I couldn't understand. They overlapped, dozens of voices hissing secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I clamped my hands over my ears and forced them back to the wheel. I couldn't lose control. And then, as suddenly as it began, the presence faded. One moment it was there, chasing, pressing, whispering. The next, the desert was silent again. My headlights cut only empty road. The air cleared, and the metallic stench was gone. My chest heaved with every breath, sweat dripping from my brow. The dashboard clock read 1:09 am, less than 30 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. I didn't stop driving until I reached Gallup. At the first gas station, under the harsh fluorescence of the pumps, I stumbled out, legs trembling. The attendant eyed me strangely as I scrubbed at the passenger window, but the streaks wouldn't come off. Deep gouges etched into the glass, like fingernails dragged through stone. I told myself I'd never drive that route at night again. But sometimes, when I'm alone on the road and the desert stretches empty around me, I hear it again. 3 sharp taps on the passenger door, and I know the desert hasn't forgotten me. The Skinwalker doesn't let go. It waits, it follows. And one night, when I least expect it, I fear it will finally climb inside. I should have never agreed to that trip, but I was tired of my coworkers calling me the office ghost because I rarely showed up to social events. My name is Daniel Harper, 32 years old, a graphic designer from Denver, Colorado. It was mid-October, and some friends from work had organized a weekend camping trip deep in Pike National Forest. I figured a couple of nights under the stars would do me good, clear my head, maybe help me shake off the insomnia that had been clinging to me like a shadow. But I didn't know then that the woods hold things that never sleep. We hiked in about 5 miles, our boots crunching over brittle leaves and pine needles. The air smelled sharp, like sap and damp earth, with a faint chill that nipped at the edges of my jacket. By the time we reached the clearing where we would set up camp, the sun was bleeding orange across the horizon. We pitched our tents, built a small fire, and laughed over cheap beer and trail food. I remember thinking it felt almost normal, too normal. Like the kind of calm that exists just before something tears it apart. It was Ethan, the loudest of our group, who first mentioned the legend. He leaned forward, eyes glinting in the firelight, and said, "You ever hear about the whispers?" We all shook our heads, though my stomach clenched at the word. Ethan grinned, teeth flashing. "They say if you sit around a campfire too long out here, you'll start to hear voices. Not just any voices, ones you recognize. Dead relatives, old friends, people you miss. The trick is, if you answer back, they'll come for you." The group chuckled nervously, brushing it off as one of Ethan's tall tales. But the woods around us seemed to lean closer, drinking in his words. The fire popped and hissed, and I could swear the shadows between the trees rippled just a little deeper. I laughed along, but something inside me tightened like a drawn bow. Later, when most of the group had stumbled off to their tents, only a few of us remained by the fire. The flames had burned down to embers, glowing red like the eyes of something watching. I tossed another log on, the smoke curling up in thin white ribbons that smelled of pine and resin. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint rustle of wind through branches. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind carrying some random note, a trick of the trees. But then it formed into something clearer. A voice. My voice. No, not mine, my brother's. My dead brother, Danny. It whispered low and broken, just the way he sounded before the accident when his ribs were crushed and his lungs collapsed. My blood ran cold. He'd been gone 7 years, buried in a cemetery just outside of Boulder, yet here he was, calling my name from the edge of the firelight. I froze, my breath shallow, ears straining. The voice came again, closer this time, curling around me like smoke. "Danny, help me." My chest clenched, and for a moment I nearly answered. But Ethan's story clawed its way back into my mind. "Don't answer back. If you answer back, they'll come for you." My tongue pressed hard against my teeth, holding back the word that begged to escape. I turned sharply to the others, but they didn't seem to hear it. Sarah was dozing in her chair, head tilted back. Mark was poking at the fire absent-mindedly, humming some tune under his breath. Neither of them reacted. It was just me hearing it. I stood and walked toward the trees, against every instinct screaming at me not to. The darkness between the trunks was thick, layered, alive. The voice seemed to pull me, thread by thread, deeper into the forest. My boots sank into soft earth, the smell of rot and moss rising up around me. My flashlight beam jittered across the undergrowth, catching on branches that looked like clawed hands reaching out. "Danny," the whisper grew sharper, urgent, almost angry now. "Why didn't you save me?" I stumbled, my throat closing up. My brother's car accident played out in my mind, the twisted metal, the smoke, the way I'd crawled across broken glass to reach him, only to be pulled back by firemen as the wreck flared up. His scream had been the last thing I'd ever heard from him. That same scream echoed faintly now, woven into the night like a thread I couldn't cut. I stopped. I couldn't go further. I forced myself back toward camp, each step heavier than the last. The whisper followed, right up until the glow of the fire touched my boots. Then it vanished, swallowed whole by the crackling flames. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my tent listening to the wind, every rustle a word, every creak a syllable. The smell of smoke clung to my clothes and hair, seeping into me. Just as I started to drift, I heard it again, muffled through the canvas of the tent. Not my brother this time. My mother. She's still alive, living in a nursing home outside the city. But her voice was weak, fragile, begging, "Danny, please don't leave me here." The next morning, I was pale and trembling, but I said nothing to the group. We packed up, laughed, took photos, and hiked back out as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the weight in my chest, the sense that something had followed me. Back in Denver, the whispers didn't stop. Sometimes they came from my closet. sometimes from the corners of my apartment. Sometimes they were voices of people still alive, sometimes long gone. Always soft, always just out of reach, but always mine to hear. I've stopped answering my phone because I can't tell anymore if it's really ringing or if it's them. The worst part is the smell. That faint scent of campfire smoke, pine, and resin. It clings to me wherever I go, no matter how many showers I take. People at the office wrinkle their noses, ask if I've been barbecuing. I laugh it off, but inside, I'm unraveling. I don't know if Ethan knew what he was talking about, or if he just stumbled onto some truth hidden in folklore. But I do know this. Once you've sat by the fire and the whispers find you, they don't let go. They follow you home. They call your name in the quiet hours. And eventually, I'm terrified I'll slip. That one night, I'll answer back. And when I do, whatever waits beyond the flames will finally step through. Until then, I live with the whispers. And the fire never really goes out. When I think back on it now, I can still hear the coyotes. Not the ordinary yips and howls that echo through the desert nights of northern New Mexico, but something darker threaded through the sound, something that felt like it was meant for me alone. My name is Michael Torres, 36 years old, a freelance photographer from Santa Fe. I was hired last fall to shoot a series of rustic properties and landscapes for a magazine spread on forgotten ranches of the Southwest. One of the locations on my list was an old property known only as the Navajo Ranch, sitting near the Colorado border, a place that even before I set foot on it, carried with it a reputation I couldn't ignore. The owner who hired me had been vague about its condition, saying only that the ranch had history, and that the photographs should capture its authentic spirit. I had no idea how much weight those words carried until I pulled up in my truck late one afternoon. The sky was already beginning to bruise with twilight, streaks of red and violet stretching across the wide horizon. The land smelled dry, like sun-baked earth and sagebrush, with a faint metallic tang of dust. The ranch itself sat silent and skeletal, wooden fences leaning, barns collapsing in on themselves, and the old adobe house cracked like a dried riverbed. What struck me first were the warnings. Carved into the fence posts and burned into the barn doors were strange symbols I didn't recognize, sharp, angular shapes that seemed almost alive in the fading light. My grandmother used to tell me stories when I was a kid about Navajo protection marks, sigils meant to keep out skinwalkers and restless spirits. Seeing them here made my throat tighten. The rational part of me told myself they were just graffiti, old etchings left by someone long ago, but the part of me that had grown up hearing the stories knew better. I started working quickly, setting up my camera and tripod, eager to catch the last of the daylight. The air was still, almost unnaturally so. Not a bird, not a cricket, not even the usual hiss of wind through the grass. It was the kind of silence that presses on your eardrums, that makes your own heartbeat sound loud. My boots crunched over gravel as I moved from angle to angle, snapping photos of the main house, the barns, the corral. Every time I looked back, I felt like the symbols on the wood had shifted, like their edges were darker than before. As the sun dipped below the mesa, I decided to grab a few shots inside the house. The door creaked like a dying thing when I pushed it open, the smell of mildew and dust washing over me. My flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing peeling plaster walls, broken furniture, and again, the same angular symbols scratched deep into every surface. My camera shutter echoed unnaturally loud in the stillness. At one point, I thought I heard soft footsteps upstairs, but when I froze and listened, all I could hear was my own pulse pounding in my ears. I told myself I was just tired. That's when I heard the whisper. It was faint, barely a breath, but distinct enough to raise every hair on my arms. Go. Just that one word, spoken in a rasp that seemed to come from the walls themselves. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it around the room, catching only dust motes and shadows. My stomach lurched, and I decided I'd taken enough pictures for the day. Back outside, the air had turned bitterly cold, much too fast for a desert night. My breath hung in pale clouds, and as I packed up my equipment, I heard the coyotes. But they didn't sound right. Their cries stretched too long, too low, and carried something almost human in them. One sounded like a laugh, jagged and wrong. My grandmother's words came back to me again, warning about Skinwalker's witches who could take the form of animals, who lured travelers with sounds and voices not their own. I tightened my grip on my keys and shoved my gear into the truck bed with shaking hands. That was when I saw it. At the edge of the ranch, where the last glow of the horizon bled into night, a figure stood. Tall, gaunt, draped in something like animal hide, its head cocked too far to one side. I couldn't see its face, not really just the glint of eyes that reflected like an animal's in my headlights. My throat went dry, and I fumbled with my camera, snapping one last photo through the windshield before flooring the gas pedal. Gravel spat from beneath my tires as I tore down the dirt road, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't look back until I hit the paved highway miles later. Even then, I kept driving, the darkness pressing in on all sides, my hands slick with sweat on the wheel. The smell of dust and sage clung to me, but underneath it was something else, something coppery, like blood. I didn't sleep that night, tossing in the cheap motel bed, staring at the ceiling and hearing the faint echo of those distorted coyotes outside. When I got home, I thought it was over. I dumped my photos onto my computer, relieved to see nothing unusual, until I reached the last frame, the one I'd taken through the windshield. The figure was closer, not at the edge of the ranch, not in the distance, but pressed against the glass of my truck, its face pale and stretched, mouth gaping open in a soundless scream. Its eyes burned like embers, and even through the screen, I swear I could feel them on me. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the whispers haven't stopped. Sometimes I hear them outside my apartment door, sometimes from the dark corners of my living room. The other night, my computer turned on by itself, and that same photo was open, staring back at me. The face seemed clearer, sharper, as if it's moving closer each time I see it. I haven't gone back to work. I barely leave my apartment. The smell of dust and sage fills every room, no matter how much I clean, and the coyotes cry outside my window every night, even here in the city, where there shouldn't be any. I don't know if I brought something back from the ranch, or if it followed me willingly. Maybe it marked me when I stepped inside that house, or maybe the moment I heard the whisper, it claimed me. All I know is that I feel watched, constantly, as if something is waiting for me to slip, to answer it. And sometimes, when the world is quietest, I hear my grandmother's voice in the static of the air, whispering a prayer in Navajo I can't quite understand. But even her voice is fading now, drowned beneath the others. I don't think I'll ever be free of Navajo Ranch. Not until it takes me. There are things you're told never to do in the desert. Don't walk without water. Don't hike without telling someone where you're going. And above all, never answer a voice calling your name if you can't see where it's coming from. I used to think those were just bits of Navajo folklore meant to scare kids into staying close to camp. That was before I heard my own name echoing from a canyon wall when no one should have known I was there. My name is Daniel Morales, 32 years old, a schoolteacher from Albuquerque. Last summer, in July, I took a solo hiking trip through southern Utah, wanting to clear my head after a rough school year. I didn't plan to find anything more than silence and red rock. What I found instead has never left me. The trail I followed led deep into a remote slot canyon, the kind you see in travel magazines, narrow passages of sandstone twisting and curling like the inside of some giant's throat. the walls painted orange and crimson by the setting sun. The air smelled of dust and hot rock, the heat pressing against my skin like an oven. I was carrying a single pack with water, jerky, and my camera. The light was fading faster than I expected, but I wasn't worried. I'd hiked plenty of times before. Still, the silence of that place felt heavier than any trail I'd ever been on. There were no birds, no insects, no wind. Just the sound of my boots scuffing grit across stone and the occasional drip of water seeping from cracks in the canyon wall. I set up camp in a wider section of the canyon where the walls opened just enough for me to see a slice of darkening sky. I lit a small fire with the dry brush I'd gathered, the smell of smoke mixing with the mineral tang of the stone. As the flames flickered, shadows stretched long and strange across the canyon walls, bending like figures in motion. I tried not to let it bother me. That was when I heard it. At first, it was just the echo of my own cough bouncing back at me, perfectly normal. But then, a moment later, I heard something else, a voice. Soft, drawn out, and unmistakably human. It called my name, Daniel. The sound stretched down the canyon like it was sliding on the walls themselves. I froze, jerky halfway to my mouth. My heart thudded once, hard. I was supposed to be alone. No one knew I had camped here, not even my family. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of acoustics. Slot canyons are famous for carrying sound in weird ways. But the voice came again, closer this time. Daniel? My skin prickled. It sounded wrong, too deliberate, almost like someone testing my name for the first time, dragging it slowly over their tongue. I turned off my lantern and let the fire burn low, crouching in the dark. The air suddenly felt colder, like the warmth had been sucked out of the stone. My ears strained for any sign of footsteps, but all I could hear was my pulse and the crackle of dying flames. I didn't answer. My grandmother always told me, "Don't talk back to voices in the desert. They're not yours to answer." I thought about that as I sat in the dark, every muscle tight as wire. Eventually, after what felt like hours, the canyon fell silent again. I told myself it was just fatigue and fear messing with me. When dawn broke, I packed up quickly, eager to put distance between myself and whatever I'd heard. The day grew hotter as I pressed deeper into the canyon, but the unease never left. The walls seemed to close tighter around me, their smooth surfaces streaked with black water stains that looked like reaching fingers. Sweat stung my eyes, and each breath felt like pulling heat straight into my lungs. Then, as I rounded a sharp bend, I stopped dead in my tracks. There were handprints on the rock, hundreds of them, smeared into the canyon walls in dark red pigment. Some small, like children's hands, others long and distorted, as if the fingers had too many joints. They climbed the stone in uneven rows, vanishing into cracks far above my head. The sight made my stomach turn. I'd read about ancestral Pueblo and rock art before, but these weren't patterns or symbols. These were desperate, chaotic, like someone had been clawing to get out. I snapped a picture, my hands trembling, and that's when I heard the voice again. This time it wasn't behind me, it was above me. My own name, whispered down from the rim of the canyon, as if someone was leaning over and calling. I craned my neck to look, but the walls stretched 50 feet straight up, nothing but a thin slice of sky. No one could be up there. Still, the voice slid down again, smooth and unnatural. Daniel. I stumbled back, tripping over loose stone, and my water bottle clattered to the ground. As I scrambled to grab it, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Another voice joined the first, different but similar, calling my name again, perfectly echoing the first one. Then another, and another, until the canyon was alive with whispers, all of them calling Daniel, 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 overlapping until it was a chorus bouncing off every wall. I dropped everything and ran. My breath came in ragged gasps, the the sound of my boots hammering against stone drowned out by the voices. They never rose to a scream. They stayed low, whispering, as if coaxing me deeper into the labyrinth. At one point, I swear I felt hot breath brush the back of my neck, though when I spun around, there was nothing but empty rock. I don't remember how long I ran, only that I didn't stop until my legs burned and I collapsed in a narrow alcove. My throat was raw, every breath scraping like sandpaper. The voices had stopped, replaced by a silence that was somehow worse. I sat there shaking, trying to convince myself I was just dehydrated, hallucinating, maybe even sunstruck. But deep down I knew what I'd heard. I forced myself to keep moving until I found a trail marker leading back to the main path. It took me the rest of the day to climb out, and by the time I reached my truck, the sky was streaked with stars. I thought I was safe. I thought whatever haunted that canyon would stay behind with the handprints in the shadows. I was wrong. That night, back in my apartment in Albuquerque, I dreamed of the canyon walls closing around me, voices sliding down the stone like water. When I woke, my room was dark and silent, but the air was heavy, stifling. I turned on my lamp, and for just a moment, I could swear I saw a smudge on my wall, a handprint, long-fingered and dark. It was gone when I blinked, but the feeling wasn't. The next morning, I opened my phone to look at the photos I'd taken. Most were fine, but when I reached the one of the handprints, my chest tightened. The photo wasn't of rock anymore. It was of faces. Dozens of pale, hollow-eyed faces pressed against the stone, mouths open as if calling. Ever since that trip, I hear it sometimes. In my classroom, while I'm grading papers, a faint whisper brushing the back of my mind. In the grocery store, between the shuffle of carts and the hum of lights, someone softly saying my name. At night, when the city quiets, it grows stronger. Always my name, repeated slowly, deliberately, like it's testing me. I don't answer. I don't dare. But I don't think the canyon ever let me go. There are some rules you grow up with that don't make sense until it's too late. One of the first I learned, passed down from my grandmother, was simple. If you hear someone you know calling your name from the dark, and you can't see them, don't answer. She used to say it with a seriousness that unsettled me, a sharpness in her tone that made me believe it wasn't just folklore. I carried that rule with me into adulthood, tucked away like a strange superstition. I never thought I'd need it, but the night I heard my little sister's voice in the woods miles away from where she was supposed to be, I realized just how much truth those words carried. My name is Anthony Rivera. I'm 31 years old, and I work as a park ranger in northern Arizona. My shifts rotate, sometimes long days, sometimes graveyard nights. The forests here stretch for miles, dense, silent, full of old paths and older stories. I've always liked the solitude of it, the feeling of being swallowed by trees and stars. That night in late October, the air was sharp with cold, the scent of pine thick enough to taste. The moon was a pale coin slipping behind the branches, and my flashlight beam cut across trunks that looked like endless pillars. I was checking the southern trails, making sure no campers had wandered off where they weren't supposed to. The forest was unusually quiet, not even the usual rustle of deer or coyotes in the underbrush. I stopped for a moment, listening. My breath steamed in the cold, and the crunch of gravel beneath my boots seemed too loud, like the world was holding its breath. Then I heard it. Anthony? It was faint but clear, drifting between the trees. My heart skipped. I knew that voice. It was Elena, my little sister. She's 24, still living down in Phoenix, over 3 hours away. For a split second, my brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe fatigue was messing with me. But then it came again, closer this time. Anthony? Help me. The hair on the back of my neck prickled. Every instinct told me to run toward the sound, to find her, but reason screamed at me that it wasn't possible. Elena wasn't here. She couldn't be. My grandmother's warning echoed in my head like a drumbeat. Don't answer the voice if you can't see the person. I tightened my grip on my flashlight and whispered out loud, almost like a prayer, "You're not real." The forest shifted. Branches groaned above me, and the shadows seemed to lean in closer. And the voice changed. It was still Elena's tone, but warped, stretched, like someone trying to play her voice through broken speakers. And Huni. My gut twisted. I forced myself to keep walking down the trail, quicker now, my boots crunching fast against the dirt. My pulse hammered in my ears. The smell of damp earth and rotting leaves seemed stronger, almost suffocating. Behind me, the voice called again, softer now, almost playful. "Come back. I need you." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The trail curved into a clearing, and for a moment, I felt a rush of relief at the open space, the moonlight spilling silver over the ground. But that's when I saw it. Just at the edge of the trees, half hidden in shadow, stood a figure. Small, familiar. My throat went dry. It looked like Elena. Her dark hair hung in her face, her arms limp at her sides. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there staring at me with eyes that glowed faintly in the light. I whispered her name before I could stop myself. "Elena?" The figure tilted its head too far, like a puppet on a string. Then it smiled a slow, unnatural stretch of lips that didn't belong on her face. And when it spoke, the voice was perfect this time. My sister's exact tone. "I found you." Every muscle in my body screamed to run. I backed away slowly, fumbling for the radio clipped to my vest. My fingers shook as I pressed the button. "Base, this is Rivera. I think I've got a trespasser on the Southern Trail. Female, mid-20s. Need backup." Static hissed back at me. No response. I tried again, louder. "Base, do you copy?" This time, the static broke, but instead of the dispatcher's voice, I heard my sister's again, clear through the radio speaker. "Anthony." The same warped stretch, echoing like it was inside my skull. I dropped the radio. The figure stepped forward, its movements jerky, like it wasn't used to the shape it was wearing. My flashlight beam shook as I raised it, landing on its face. For a split second, it was Elena's face, pale and beautiful. Then it rippled, the features melting, shifting into something longer, darker, with a grin too wide and eyes that glowed like coals. I bolted. The forest closed around me, branches whipping at my arms, the smell of pine needles sharpened my nose. My breath tore in and out, and behind me, I heard it chasing. Not running, exactly more like slipping through the trees, always just behind me, no matter how fast I moved, and the whole time, it kept calling. My mother's voice, my father's, my best friend from college. Every voice I'd ever trusted, all whispering my name, coaxing me to stop, to turn around. I stumbled back onto the main trail, my lungs burning, and I didn't stop until I saw the ranger station lights glowing faintly through the trees. I slammed the door shut behind me and collapsed against it, sweat chilling on my skin despite the cold. For a long time, I just sat there in the dark, listening. The forest outside was silent again, too silent. When I finally worked up the courage to check my radio, it was dead batteries drained, though I'd checked them earlier that night. The next morning, I called Elena. Her sleepy voice crackled through the phone, annoyed at being woken so early. She was fine. She hadn't left Phoenix. She hadn't called for me. She laughed when I asked, but the sound made my stomach twist. I've kept working since then, but I never patrol that southern trail alone anymore. And sometimes, even on the safer routes, I'll hear my name whispered just at the edge of hearing. Always familiar, always trusted. I remember my grandmother's warning every time. Don't answer. Don't ever answer. But I worry about the day I slip, the day I forget myself and respond to a voice I love, because I know it's waiting. I know it's patient, and I know it's learning. The imitator doesn't need to catch me tonight. It just needs me to believe. I've always believed the quietest hours of the night are when the strangest things happen. Maybe that's why they call it the witching hour. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 32, and I work as a night shift security guard at a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of Santa Fe, New Mexico. The place sits at the edge of desert land where the highway fades into empty darkness. I had taken the job for steady pay, not excitement, but after what happened, I'd trade all the overtime in the world to erase the memory of that night. The warehouse is usually silent, except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional rattle of pipes when the air conditioning kicks in. My routine was simple: make rounds every hour, check the cameras, fill out the logbook. Nothing ever happened until the visitor came. It started with small, almost unnoticeable things. One night around 12:30, I heard footsteps echoing in the far aisle of the warehouse. Heavy, deliberate, dragging just slightly, as if someone's shoes were too worn. I called out, my voice carrying through the cavernous space. "Hello? Who's there?" No answer. I checked every row, flashlights sweeping across pallets of boxed goods, and found nothing but dust swirling in the beam. I told myself it must have been pipes settling, or maybe my tired brain playing tricks. But then the smell came. At exactly midnight, a faint odor began drifting through the warehouse. It wasn't the chemical smell of cleaning supplies, nor the mustiness of cardboard boxes. It was metallic, sharp, like rusted iron or blood. It seeped in slowly, clinging to my throat, making it hard to swallow. By the time I reached the far end of the building, the smell would vanish, leaving me questioning whether it had even been real. I mentioned it to a coworker once, during a shift change. He chuckled nervously and said, "You ever hear the stories about the midnight visitor? Some of the guys say he walks here." When I pressed him, he shrugged it off. "Just a ghost story, man. Don't think about it too much, or he'll come looking for you." His grin didn't reach his eyes. That night, curiosity gnawed at me. I searched online for local legends. I found scattered references on old forums. A tall, shadowy figure that visits lone night workers in warehouses, motels, gas stations, anywhere isolated. They called him the Midnight Visitor. Supposedly, if you acknowledged him, if you spoke to him, he would answer, but not with words. People described hearing their own voice echo back, twisted, warped, like something imitating them from the dark. A few posts hinted at worse things, but they stopped mid-sentence, as if the authors hadn't finished writing. I laughed it off, but unease stayed with me. The real encounter happened 2 weeks later. It was just past midnight when I was making my usual round. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. My stomach tightened. I slowed my steps, every sound magnified. The scuff of my boots, a faint buzz of electricity. Then I heard footsteps again, but this time not echoing. They were close, deliberate, pacing just out of sight beyond the nearest row of shelves. I froze. My flashlight beam trembled against the boxes. "Who's there?" I said, forcing authority into my tone. Silence. Then, softly, a whisper. It was my own voice. "Who's there?" The exact same cadence, the exact same breathy inflection, thrown back at me from the shadows. A chill tore through me. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to move, stepping around the corner with the light raised high. Nothing, just rows of inventory stacked high into the dark. But the smell hit me again, stronger than ever, metallic, rotten, like the air inside a slaughterhouse. I gagged and backed away. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but something about the silence held me in place, as if the warehouse itself was waiting. and I heard the whisper again. Only this time, it didn't echo my words. It called my name. Daniel. My blood went cold. No one at the warehouse called me by my first name. My badge said Harris. My friends rarely used it either. Hearing my name slither out of the dark in a voice almost identical to mine, it was too much. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a pallet. My flashlight flickered, and for a brief second, I saw something at the far end of the aisle. A tall figure, unnaturally thin, its limbs hanging too long. Its head tilted at a crooked angle, like it was studying me. Then the light steadied, and the figure was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it, that exhaustion had finally caught up. But the whispers followed me for the rest of the shift. Every time I turned a corner, I heard faint muttering, just out of reach, as though someone was telling secrets they didn't want me to hear. I left at dawn with trembling hands and a logbook left half empty. The next night, I considered calling in sick. But bills don't pay themselves, and I couldn't risk losing hours. I returned, heart pounding from the moment I stepped through the doors. Midnight approached, and I sat in the security office staring at the monitors. Nothing moved. The building looked calm, lifeless. Still, I heard it. Daniel. I spun toward the door, but it was closed. On the monitor, one camera in aisle 6 flickered. I leaned closer, squinting. A shadow stretched across the floor, but no object was casting it. It elongated, warped, until it filled the screen. Then the camera cut out. When it came back, the shadow was gone. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and stormed outside into the cold desert night. The air was sharp with sagebrush and dust, grounding me in something real. I lit a cigarette with shaking hands, telling myself I'd just stay out there until morning if I had to. That's when I heard it again, my own voice, whispering behind me. Don't go. I spun, and there he was. The midnight visitor stood just beyond the parking lot light at the edge of darkness. Tall, twisted, his form wavered like smoke, but his head was solid, pale, and featureless. He tilted it toward me, as if waiting. I ran. I don't remember unlocking my car or starting the engine, only the roar of the tires as I sped down the highway, headlights cutting through the desert. I didn't look in the rearview mirror, too afraid of what I might see. I quit the next morning, told my boss I couldn't handle night shifts anymore. He didn't look surprised, just nodded, almost sympathetically, like he'd heard it before. Even now, weeks later, I still hear whispers sometimes. In my apartment, late at night, just as the clock strikes 12. They never say much, just my name, or a word I've spoken earlier in the day, thrown back at me in a warped imitation. I keep the lights on, try to drown it out with music or TV, but I know it's only a matter of time before he visits again. Some nights, when the world is still and the air feels heavy, I catch myself listening for footsteps in the hall. And when I do, I remember the warning I found online, buried in one of those half-finished posts. The midnight visitor doesn't knock. He doesn't ask permission. If you hear your own voice at night, when no one else is around, don't answer. Because if you do, you've already let him in. There's something about the desert highways at night that makes you feel like you're the only person left in the world. Maybe it's the emptiness, the way the asphalt stretches into black infinity, broken only by the faint glimmer of distant lights. My name is Marcus Allen. I'm 34, and I work as a long-haul truck driver based out of Tucson, Arizona. I've driven these roads hundreds of times, alone in the cab of my rig, headphones on, engine humming, mile markers ticking past like a heartbeat. But one night last November, I realized there are some things out there that even experience can't prepare you for. I had just finished a delivery in Albuquerque and was heading south toward Tucson. The sky was clear, the desert air crisp, the moon full and casting silver streaks across the empty road. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, How quiet, too quiet. Even the usual hum of wind through the trailer's gaps seemed muffled. I had my radio on, a talk show blaring in the background, but it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. Around midnight, I passed the stretch of highway near the Oregon Mountains. The sign read, "Next service is 45 miles." I had more than enough fuel, but something about that long, empty expanse made me tense. As I drove, I noticed a car in the distance, headlights on, moving slowly behind me. That wasn't unusual, plenty of night travelers, but the way it followed, unblinking as if matching my speed, made my stomach tighten. I checked my mirrors. The car was there, every time, its lights steady, never approaching, never falling behind. I shrugged it off. Maybe the driver was tired, just keeping pace until the next rest stop. But then I saw it. The car had no driver, not visible at least. I blinked and adjusted my mirrors, expecting it to be a trick of the shadows. But the steering wheel remained empty. My heart began to race. I told myself it was a reflection, something in the moonlight. I kept my eyes on the road and tried to stay calm, but every mile felt heavier. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. The radio sounded muffled now, like static creeping under the music. I tried changing channels, but all I got was silence. That's when I heard it. A voice, low and distant at first, almost blending with the hum of the tires. "Marcus." I froze, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My name, spoken by someone or something behind me. My pulse spiked, my mind racing through every rational explanation I could muster. The voice called again, clearer this time, yet strangely distorted, like it was coming through broken glass. "Marcus, slow down." I slammed my hands to the horn instinctively, expecting a car to swerve or respond. But the road was empty. No other vehicles, no other lights, just the vast stretch of highway and my own rig barreling forward. I forced myself to keep driving, rational thoughts battling panic. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe the desert had played tricks on me. I had driven long enough to know that hallucinations could happen on empty stretches, especially at night. I tried focusing on the road, on the feeling of the wheel under my hands, on the familiar vibration of the engine. But the whisper persisted, carried on the wind that shouldn't have existed. Then, up ahead, I saw something in the headlights. A figure, standing in the middle of the lane. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, some poor soul trying to cross the highway in the dark. But the shape was wrong, too tall, too thin, limbs angled in ways that shouldn't be possible. Its face was pale, featureless, but I felt its eyes lock on mine, piercing through the windshield. I swerved violently, missing the figure by inches, my tires scraping the edge of the asphalt. My rig fishtailed, my heart hammering. I slammed the brakes, brought the truck to a stop, and leaned forward, straining to see. The road was empty again. No figure, no headlights. Nothing but the whisper in the air. "Don't leave." I tried starting the truck again, telling myself it was some desert hallucination, some trick of fatigue. But the rig wouldn't respond. The engine cranked and died. Panic clawed at me. I tried the radio once more, but it was dead, no static, no voices, nothing. And I saw it move. On the left shoulder, just at the edge of the headlights, a shadow shifted. A figure emerging from the darkness, thin and impossibly tall, its steps silent against the gravel. I wanted to scream, to throw the doors open and run, but my body refused to obey. Fear held me in place, icy and suffocating. It stopped beside the cab, bending slightly so that its face was level with the window. And then I noticed it wasn't human. Its face was pale, stretched unnaturally, its mouth twisting into shapes I didn't recognize. But the eyes were mine, my own reflection staring back at me, alive and aware, a mockery of myself. I realized then the stories. Legends whispered by truckers over CB radios, old warnings. The desert has things that imitate travelers, taking the form of those they know or those they fear, luring them off the road, away from safety. It wasn't just myth. I understood now. It was real. I slammed the truck into gear, tires squealing, and tore down the highway. Behind me, I swore I could hear footsteps matching my speed, breathing echoing off the cab, and a voice mimicking my own. Faster, faster. The miles blurred. I passed the familiar exit ramps, signs I should have recognized, but each one seemed wrong, warped in the darkness. The desert stretched endlessly, no lights ahead, no destination in sight. The whispers didn't stop, never for a second, and I felt my own reflection, watching me from every shadow, every curve of the road. Hours must have passed, though I can't be sure. My eyes stung, my hands cramped on the wheel, my heart pounding like a drum. The first light of dawn began to seep over the mountains, pale and weak. And finally, the whispers faded, retreating with the shadows. I found myself at a rest stop, my rig parked haphazardly near the edge of the lot. No figure, no shadow, nothing but the echo of my own ragged breathing. I called the police, explained what happened, but they found nothing, no tracks, no sign of anyone. Just my truck, a few tire marks in the gravel, and the endless desert stretching away. My story sounded insane, I know. I sounded insane. But I didn't care. I just wanted off that highway. I quit trucking after that night. I don't drive late anymore. I can't. The memory follows me. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the faint hum of tires on asphalt, the whisper of a voice perfectly mimicking my own, calling my name. I see the tall, thin figure in the shadows, stretching impossibly, watching, waiting. Some say it's a trick of the mind, a hallucination brought on by isolation and fatigue. But I know the truth. Out there, on the lonely highways of the desert, there's something that watches travelers, something that imitates you, learns you, and waits for the right moment. It doesn't need to rush. It has all the time in the world. And if you're driving alone, at night, along an empty stretch of road, it might already be following you. I've never driven that highway again. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear the tires echoing behind me, and a voice, eerily familiar, whispering my name. Marcus. I first heard about the shapeshifter from Mrs. Yazzie, an old Navajo woman who lived down the road from my family's place in the high desert near Shiprock, New Mexico. Her hands were wrinkled like the bark of the juniper trees that dotted the mesa, and her eyes held stories that made you uneasy just looking into them. You watch the neighbors too closely. You might see things you'll never forget. She had warned me when I was 16, passing her porch one evening. I laughed it off. My name is Jason Begay. I was 29 when I finally understood what she meant. I had grown up in the shadows of the mesas, spent years studying wildlife as a field biologist, tracking coyotes, deer, and mountain lions. I thought I knew fear. I thought I understood nature. I was wrong. It was late October, just after the first frost had dusted the desert sage with white. I had returned home after a week in Tucson for work, driving my old pickup along the winding dirt roads that crisscrossed the reservation. The sky was a deep indigo, fading into a blanket of stars, and the air smelled sharp, of cold earth and the faint resin of juniper. As I rounded a familiar bend, I saw her Mrs. Yazzie standing at the edge of her property. Her shawl fluttered in the wind, the pale moonlight glinting off her silver hair. I waved. She waved back, but then her eyes caught mine in a way that made my stomach twist. "Jason," she said, her voice low and quivering, "you should watch tonight. Be careful what you see." I smiled, brushing off the warning, assuming she meant coyotes or some trick of shadows. but something in the tone of her voice made my palms sweat. I parked my truck near my family's house, the engine still warm, and decided to take a walk toward the mesa, where the wind howled through the rock formations like ghosts whispering. The night was silent except for the occasional rustle of small animals. The moonlight painted the desert in silver and black, and every shadow seemed longer, sharper, as if waiting for me to make a mistake. I had just crossed a small wash when I saw him. My neighbor, Mr. Clancy, the man who lived 3 houses down, standing in the open under a juniper tree. I waved, and he waved back, smiling. That alone was unsettling. It was late, no reason for him to be out wandering. But the unease I felt wasn't from his presence. It was something about the shape of his body, the way the light struck him. He shifted, his posture changing almost imperceptibly, like the shadows themselves were bending him. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. The desert can do that, especially under moonlight. But then I saw the fur, dark, bristling fur, spreading across his arms and chest. His face elongated, jaw stretching forward, ears growing tall and pointed. I stumbled back, mouth dry, unable to breathe, as my mind tried to rationalize what my eyes refused to lie about. The man I had known, the neighbor I had shared greetings with for years, was now a creature, a wolf-like beast standing upright, muscles rippling unnaturally, fur gleaming under the pale moon. I wanted to run, but my feet refused. The wind seemed to have died, leaving only the soft, almost inaudible snarl of the creature as it turned toward me. Its eyes my neighbor's eyes, yet wrong, glowing amber and alive with something ancient locked onto mine. I could feel the weight of intelligence there, a knowing that terrified me more than claws or teeth ever could. Mrs. Yazzy's words echoed in my mind. You watch the neighbors too closely. You might see things you'll never forget. Now I understood. This was no animal. This was a shapeshifter, a creature of the old stories, a being that could wear the skin of someone you trusted and twist it into something else entirely. I stumbled backward, tripping over a rock, scraping my hands against the cold desert stone. The creature didn't chase me, not yet. It tilted its head, watching, waiting, as if curious. My heart pounded, echoing in my ears, and the scent of wet earth and something metallic filled my nostrils. I realized then that this creature could mimic people, yes, but it could also mimic life itself, the warmth, the familiarity, everything that makes you trust someone. I scrambled to my feet and bolted toward my truck, the sound of my boots crunching on gravel deafening in the quiet night. Behind me, I heard a low growl that shifted seamlessly into a human voice. Jason, don't be afraid. My stomach twisted. That was my neighbor's voice, calm, familiar, coaxing. Yet it carried a growl beneath it, a hunger that chilled me to the bone. I leaped into the truck and slammed the door, fumbling for the keys. The engine roared to life, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, the creature was gone. Only the shadows under the juniper remained, shifting as if something had passed through them. I wanted to convince myself it had vanished, that perhaps I had imagined the transformation in the cold desert night. But I couldn't. Something deep in my gut told me that what I had seen was real, and that it was patient. The drive back to my house was silent, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Every time I passed a shadow, every rustle of brush, I expected it to be there. When I finally reached the lights of my home, I thought the encounter was over. My mother was asleep. The house smelled faintly of sage burned in the morning, and the desert beyond the windows seemed quiet, normal, human. But I couldn't shake the feeling. For days afterward, I saw shapes in the corner of my vision, shadows that moved unnaturally, sometimes mimicking familiar people who weren't there. I heard soft growls behind closed doors, low whispers calling my name when I was alone. I asked Mrs. Yazzie about it, hoping for guidance, and she only shook her head. They are patient, she said. They wait, they watch. You must respect the land, respect the boundaries. But some of them, they have learned to cross them. A week later, I found out that Mr. Clancy had been gone for days. Family members said he had gone on a trip, but no one knew where. When I drove past his house, the lights were off, the yard overgrown, yet at night, I sometimes think I see a tall, fur-covered figure moving past the window, watching, listening. I've become careful. I avoid wandering at night, especially near the mesas, the washes, the juniper trees that seem so serene by day but whisper secrets by moonlight. I respect the boundaries Mrs. Yazzie spoke of, but I can't shake the memory of that amber gaze, the way the creature moved, the way it was familiar and yet entirely alien. Some nights, I swear I hear soft footsteps on the porch, even when no one is there. And sometimes, just before dawn, a low growl that turns into a familiar voice calls my name, and I remember. I remember that the world is older than we are, that the desert holds things our minds can barely understand. And I remember that shapeshifters are patient. They watch, they wait, and sometimes the person you think you know is no longer who they were at all. I never thought the kind of fear I'd remember for the rest of my life would come from my own backyard. My name is Lauren Bennett. I'm 31, and I work as a graphic designer from home, which usually means long hours alone in front of a screen, with nothing but the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional bark of my neighbor's dog to keep me company. My husband, Tom, works night shifts at a hospital, and our 2 kids, Ellie and Max, were at a friend's sleepover the night it happened. It was quiet in a way that should have been peaceful, but the kind of quiet that blankets the senses and hides the unnatural. It was just past 11 when I first heard it. A sharp, blood-curdling scream that seemed to come from just beyond the kitchen window, from our backyard. I froze mid-sip of my coffee, the warmth forgotten in my throat. The scream wasn't human. It was guttural, twisted, and prolonged, like a voice being torn apart from the inside. My heart raced. I grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter silly. I know, but it felt like I needed a weapon, something tangible to hold on to. I crept to the back door, peering out through the glass. The backyard looked normal. The swing set creaked softly in the wind. The trees were still, and the grass glimmered under the faint moonlight. Nothing moved. Nothing, except for the sense that I wasn't alone. My skin prickled. I heard it again. A scream, short this time, closer. It made my chest tighten. My first thought was an intruder, but the screams weren't human, and I knew it. I stepped onto the porch slowly, knife raised, ears straining. The air smelled different, sharp and sour, like something had died nearby, but I saw nothing. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, scanning every shadow between the garden and the fence. That's when I noticed them, tracks pressed into the soil near the edge of the flower beds. They weren't human. Each footprint had deep claw marks, long enough to suggest a predatory hand or paw. My stomach churned. The prints led from the fence toward the center of the yard and then disappeared. I called out, my voice trembling. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The only response was the soft rustle of leaves and a low, almost inaudible growl that came from the far corner of the yard. My hand shook on the knife. I should have run back inside, locked the door, called Tom. But I was rooted to the spot, staring into the darkness, heart hammering, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The next scream shattered my momentary composure. It came from behind the shed this time, closer, more desperate, more raw. I couldn't tell if it was a person, a creature, or something else entirely. My feet moved before my brain could catch up. I tiptoed toward the shed, trying to keep my breathing shallow, trying to convince myself I wasn't going insane. I reached the corner of the shed and peered around. Nothing. Empty shadows. But the smell intensified, rotting, metallic, a stench that made bile rise in my throat. The ground was soft here, churned up, like something had been digging. Then I noticed the marks again. Deep gouges in the earth, scratches that ran diagonally across the yard, as if whatever had made them had a violent need to claw its way toward something or someone. I stumbled back, tripping over the hose, cursing under my breath. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, deep, coming from behind me. I froze. My skin crawled. I didn't dare look. My instincts screamed to run, to throw myself into the house and lock every door, but something compelled me to turn slowly. And I saw it. A shadow, taller than any human, crouched low near the far fence. Its limbs were long and thin, contorted in ways that shouldn't be possible, ending in sharp claws that glinted in the moonlight. Its head tilted in an unnatural angle, and its eyes, if they were eyes shown faintly red, reflecting the moon. I screamed, stepping back, tripping over the porch railing. It didn't move, didn't advance, but I could feel its awareness, its intelligence, as though it was studying me. I ran inside, slammed the door, locked it, and grabbed my phone. Tom answered after a few rings. My voice was high and frantic. "Tom, there's something in the backyard. I don't know what it is. It's not human. There are tracks, claw marks. I don't know." He tried to calm me down. "Lauren, it's late. Maybe the kids are playing a prank, or it's a stray dog." "No, you don't understand. This isn't a dog. It's smart. It's watching me." "It screamed, Tom. I heard it scream." I could hear his voice faltering, realizing I wasn't joking. Okay. Lock all the doors. Stay inside. I'm leaving work. I'll be home in 20 minutes. I hung up and sat by the window, knife in hand, heart hammering. The backyard was quiet again. Too quiet. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling leaves and soft hisses. My eyes darted between the fence, the garden, the shed, searching for any movement. And then, faintly, I heard it again, a whisper this time, soft, almost teasing. "Lauren?" I jumped back. The voice wasn't human. It carried a rasp, a wet, gurgling quality that made my stomach turn. I didn't recognize it as belonging to any neighbor, any animal I had ever heard. It was something else entirely. I saw the tracks again. The claw marks had deepened, almost as if the creature had pressed its full weight against the earth. Testing, waiting. I shivered. There was no way it had come and gone on its own. Whatever had made those screams, those marks, was still out there, watching, patient, aware. Minutes passed or hours. Time became meaningless in the grip of fear. Every rustle of leaves, every groan of wood in the wind, every creak of the house made me flinch. And then, as if to remind me it hadn't left, a scream ripped through the night again. Longer this time, closer to the house, impossibly loud, tearing through my chest. It ended abruptly, leaving a silence so deep it pressed against my eardrums. I called Tom again. "It's back. It's right outside. Please hurry." I barricaded the doors and windows as best I could. I clutched the knife like a lifeline. The air smelled sharper now, iron and rot, mingled with the scent of the garden dirt turned over. The moonlight glinted off the claws that had been pressed into the soil, leading from the fence to the deck stairs. Finally, I heard the sound of the truck outside. Tom pulled into the driveway, doors slamming, engine roaring. I rushed outside, stumbling, and he grabbed me, pulling me toward the car. I looked back once, into the backyard. Nothing, only the claw marks, the deep gouges in the soil, and the shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally under the moon. The police came, but they found nothing. No prints, no tracks, no creature, no disturbance, only the disturbed dirt in the backyard. Tom held my hand, reassuring me, but I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. and I knew it hadn't gone anywhere. Weeks later, we moved. I couldn't stay in that house. Every time the wind shifted just right, every time a branch scraped against a window, I remembered. I remembered the screams, the clawed prints, the eyes that seemed to follow me from the shadows. I can't explain it. I try to rationalize it, maybe a large wild animal, maybe something in my mind, but the memory is too vivid, the fear too real. Sometimes, in the quiet of a new home, I still hear it. A scream in the night, faint but unmistakable. And sometimes, in the garden, I imagine claws pressing into the soil, waiting, watching, patient. The backyard is not safe. The darkness there is alive. And I know that whatever screamed that night, whatever left those clawed footprints, is still out there, somewhere, waiting for the next chance to come closer. I've been driving long stretches of highway for over a decade, hauling freight across New Mexico and Arizona, and I thought I'd seen just about everything. My name is Daniel Torres, 37, a long-haul truck driver who knows the deserts and canyons like the back of his hand. But nothing I've experienced compares to the night I picked up the hitchhiker, or rather, the night he or she vanished before my eyes. It was late October, just past midnight, the kind of hour when the highway seems to stretch forever, black asphalt melting into the shadows of the desert. The moon was a thin crescent, barely enough light to make out the distant mesas and scrub brush. My rig hummed steadily under me, tires humming against the road. I was tired, hungry, my eyelids heavy, but I had one more delivery to make before dawn. That's when I saw him, or maybe her, standing at the edge of the road. A solitary figure, thumb extended, wearing a worn denim jacket and a hood pulled low over the face. At first, I thought it was reckless, someone who shouldn't be out here alone. But there was something in the posture, the way the figure didn't flinch at the passing trucks, that made me stop. I slowed, pulling over carefully. The engine's roar faded, replaced by the soft whistle of the wind through the canyon walls. The figure stepped closer. I lowered the window. "Need a ride?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly despite trying to sound casual. The hitchhiker nodded, a simple tilt of the head. No words, just nodded. I gestured to the passenger seat. "Hop in." The figure climbed in silently, settling into the seat. I caught a glimpse of the face under the hood. Pale, almost too pale, like the moon had drained the color from it. The eyes were dark, deep, with a kind of emptiness that made my stomach twist. I turned my attention back to the road, glancing at the mirrors. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, at least not in any way I could perceive. The first mile or two passed in silence, the hum of the tires on asphalt the only sound. Then I noticed it, a pungent odor, sweet and sour, like rotting meat mixed with gasoline. My stomach churned. "Do you smell that?" I asked, more to myself than to the passenger. The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just sat there, still as a statue. I tried to focus on the road. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe fatigue had made my senses play tricks on me. But the smell grew stronger, curling around the cab, filling my lungs with something metallic and decayed. I glanced at the passenger again. The hood had fallen back slightly. I should have seen a face, a reaction, but nothing. No breath, no pulse, nothing human. I slammed on the brakes instinctively. "Hey, what the hell?" The seat was empty. The figure had vanished. I stumbled back, hands gripping the wheel, heart hammering. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. The road stretched empty, the desert still and silent except for the wind. But the smell remained, thick and pungent, clinging to the cab, making me gag. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. A prank? Some urban legend come to life? I had heard the stories, the disappearing hitchhiker, the phantom traveler, but I'd always laughed them off. Until now. I pulled over to the shoulder, slamming the rig into park, breathing hard. I turned the cab inside out with my flashlight. Every crevice, every corner. Nothing. No coat, no footprints in the dust. Only the smell. Rotten, iron sweet, lingering. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking, and tried to call my dispatcher. The signal was weak, crackling, distorted. When I finally got through, my voice shook as I explained what had happened. There was someone in the seat, just gone. I don't understand. He didn't respond at first. Then finally, he said, "Don, maybe it's the road. Maybe you're tired. Just take a break. Rest somewhere safe." I wanted to argue, to tell him this was real, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't explain the smell, the way the figure had been there and then vanished. My instincts screamed at me to drive, to leave the stretch of highway behind, but I couldn't stop looking back, scanning the darkness for the faintest shadow. The next few miles were agonizing. Every bump in the asphalt, every distant howl of a coyote made me jump. The cab felt heavy, the air thick, still clinging with the stench of decay. I kept checking the passenger seat. Empty, silent. Yet every time I looked, my skin prickled, as if unseen eyes were tracking me, mocking me. Somewhere in my mind, a story from childhood resurfaced. Old tales told by truckers on CB radios, whispered in diners late at night. A traveler picks you up, asks for a ride, and vanishes, leaving a scent behind, a warning, a memory that chills you to your core. They said it was a spirit, a soul trapped between worlds, or sometimes something darker, testing you, marking you. I shivered, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. By the time I reached the next rest stop, the sun was just beginning to tint the horizon pale pink. I parked, sat in silence, and tried to breathe. The smell lingered faintly, even as the morning air brushed the cab windows. I stepped out, circling the rig, looking for anything unusual. The gravel was undisturbed. The desert wind played across the hood, carrying only dust and the faint scent of sage from a nearby roadside shrine. Nothing else. I stayed at that rest stop until the morning, trying to shake off the fear, but the memory haunted me. The figure, pale and silent, the smell that clung to my clothes, the feeling of being watched, even when I was alone, all of it embedded in my mind like claws. When I finally resumed driving, I couldn't look at the passenger seat. The highway stretched out before me, empty, ordinary, yet I felt its presence, patient, waiting. And every so often, in the quiet stretches where the moonlight fades, I swear I can smell it again, a sweet, sour, metallic odor that makes my stomach twist and my skin crawl. I haven't picked up a hitchhiker since. I can't. I don't want to see that pale figure again. Don't want to smell that decayed sweetness in the air. But I know, deep down, that it's out there, waiting. And if you're driving alone, late at night, on a stretch of road where the desert stretches empty and silent, it might already be standing on the shoulder, thumb out, hood low over its face, ready for the next ride. Some nights, when I'm alone in my cab, the faintest rustle of fabric, the soft creak of the seatbelt, makes me turn. Nothing is ever there, but the smell lingers. And I know the disappearing hitchhiker is patient. It waits. It always waits.